Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Football Friday podcast as we get ready for Week 3 in the 2017 NFL season. Matt Catrillo, Alex Kozora, Tyler DiGiacomo here with you. No Ian Hunter this week, but a big announcement with him. And for those of you who haven't seen on social media, Ian's becoming a daddy in April. So congratulations to our man Ian. Obviously very excited for him and his wife Virginia. Guys, what's going on?
Hey, yeah, congrats to Ian. Hopefully you're not going to be a father soon, Catrillo. I will.
No, not in the cards right now. I promise you.
Good. Because the moment you become a dad is the moment that I leave America for greener pastures. But otherwise, I am good.
D-Jock, how are you?
Fantastic, Matt. How's it going, man?
Everything's great. Mr. DiGiacomo, good to have you back on the show. And later on in the show as well, we're going to continue our newest segment to the program, our fantasy football segment with our man Mike Waterloo. So make sure to stay tuned for that later on in the show as well. And hopefully we'll hear back from Ian next week to talk more about his new edition coming up in April. So first, guys, it was a wild NFL Sunday starting prior to the games. We'll kind of go through those sequence of events as well. But first, we'll start with what pertained to the Steelers. And Minnesota quarterback Sam Bradford ended up not playing, was a very late scratch because of a knee injury. His knee kind of started swelling up. It's the same knee that's been surgically repaired twice in that ACL area. After his pregame warm-up didn't go so well, Case Keenum comes in. He gets the start. Steelers take advantage, and they win at 26-9. And their offense plays a little bit better than last week. Big coming-out party for Martavis Bryant as well. He had the big touchdown to start things off. So, Alex, I'll start with you. I guess we'll start there with Bradford and how much of a dynamic that really changed this game big time.
Well, I'm sure Vikings fans can answer that question better than I can, but obviously it was a big downgrade to go from Bradford to Keenum. Changed kind of I don't know if it changed the game plan too much because it was already basically installed, and they're, I guess, similar quarterbacks, similar mobility, just overall strengths, weaknesses kind of guys. But sure, it hurt him a lot, but I think still, that's a really good Vikings team. They're going to be excellent when Bradford returns, which I believe is going to be this Sunday. And anytime you can shut down Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen the way the Steelers did, really has to get talked about more than it should. Those guys lit up the Saints. I know it was the Saints, but still completely invisible, especially Diggs against Pittsburgh. So credit to Artie Burns, Joe Hayden for doing that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point you bring up. Really, it was a big step in the right direction for the whole Steelers defense in general. And Alex, I know we'll talk about this next after D-Jock gets his thoughts here on a video you posted breaking down the film of what's worked for the Steelers. They're second now in the league in sacks with 9 already, just compared to basically 1 that they had all of last season. What you mentioned on the video, Alex, was really none because it was a Andy Dalton kind of slide getting out of the way type thing. But we'll go back to that in a sec. D-Jock, your original thoughts from this game, of course. Bradford sitting out obviously doesn't help the Vikings in any way.
Well, no, yeah, the Vikings were counting on Bradford to play. I think the Eagles. Wow. The Steelers were going to win anyway. But no, Steelers just took care of business. Kind of ho-hum. They wasn't, any part of the game that I thought the Steelers were going to give it away. So Steelers roll on once again.
Well, let's talk about this defensive line, Alex. As you mentioned, 9 sacks for the Steelers, second in the league. What's been working for them?
Well, it's always a combination. As Steelers will say, rush and coverage always go together. But as you alluded to, Matt, the thing I pointed out in the video was kind of the rush lane integrity, the gap integrity that the Steelers have had on the backside of blitzes and just their overall contain. So regardless of the quarterbacks you face, again, Steelers have not exactly been playing the murderer's row of quarterbacks, but regardless of who that guy is, the importance is to keep him within the pocket, not let him have easy escape lanes. Steelers were terrible, absolutely terrible at this last year. If they would have just been disciplined in that regard, they could have led the league in sacks, even with the less talented personnel that they had. I really believe that. But this year, whenever you're seeing that ability to contain, especially the more mobile quarterbacks like DeShone Kizer week 1, it makes a huge difference. You can point to 3 or 4 sacks directly as a result of that ability to keep the quarterback within the pocket. So it's a huge turnaround, and you're seeing the positive results because of it.
D-Jock, if the Steelers are able to keep this going throughout the course of the season, we know what they have on the secondary side of things, although they still have some weak spots in that portion of the defense, but still, you're able to get pressure on the quarterback. We obviously know eventually things will start to come in full speed for the Steelers offensively. This is going to be a very dangerous team in the AFC, obviously, which we knew from the preseason, but now it's maybe perhaps come even more dangerous with what they're able to do defensively now. Oh, I think we might have lost D-Jock there.
No, I'm here.
Oh, you got you. All right, here we go. So, what's your thoughts there?
I heard the question. I mean, the Steelers, as I said before, are in a really weak division, especially now that the Ravens have dropped off. Even though the Browns are a little bit better, and the Bengals will always beat 500 forever. So definitely, the Steelers should roll through the divisional games. They roll in the playoffs with 12, 13 wins, maybe 13 is a little too much, but definitely 12. But it's definitely them and the Patriots coming out of the AFC there. I don't really see anybody else really at this point, only 3 weeks in, challenging them.
Not the Chiefs?
But again, the Chiefs didn't look that good against our Eagles there, Matt. I don't know. And they had one, big win against the Patriots. So some people are going to start to anoint them. And I'm, not ready to do that yet. I mean, the Chiefs are good. Breed's a good,
fair,
coach. But just because one big win, or 2 wins now, doesn't really make them, top of the league for me. But no, again, the Steelers is a team that's, been good for a while now. And, again, going back to the speculations, the rumor mill, of Roethlisberger, could be his last year. Maybe that window's closing on him. A team that's been very good for a while. Now you have Martavis Bryant back, who had a big breakout game last week. So Steelers are really clicking on all cylinders here.
And, of course, they have the lowly Chicago Bears this Sunday in Chicago. We'll talk about that matchup a little bit later on. But first, now we'll go to the Eagles next. And, of course, Tyler, you already started alluding to that. The Eagles going toe-for-toe with the Chiefs, coming off the big win against New England in Week 1 before things unraveled for them in the fourth in a 27-20 loss. And, of course, one of the biggest takeaways from this game, there are a lot of positives to this, and we definitely will get to that. And I even had a story about this coming up on Pro Football Spot later on today, so make sure you go check that out, that I think the Eagles can use to build on and possibly have showed some signs that they could be a possible playoff team. But you still can't ignore the woes that continue in the running game, so we're going to start with talking about that first. Most notably out of this is LeGarrette Blount, 0 carries after 14 last week. I'm going to start with that right there. I have always been a defender of LeGarrette Blount. I thought it was a right call by the Eagles. I think the Eagles should have used him as the lead back. I was a little bit disappointed and surprised that he didn't get any carries this week. But at the same time, this has told me something. So I guess I've had a negative epiphany, if you will, about where LeGarrette Blount should stand with this football team going forward. When you go from 14 carries week 1 to 0 carries week 2, that tells me something. You have to trust the coaching staff here and Doug Peterson that obviously something is just not clicking, something's just not right for LeGarrette Blount to fit in this offense as a whole. And I talked about this on Pro Football Spot as well. You can check that out too, where the Eagles should go from here in the running game. I think it should be full dose now of Wendell Smallwood and start bringing in Corey Clement and see what he can do as well. And I think you can still use Blount in some areas, primarily for short yardage, if you get under center. I can't emphasize that enough. But I think basically you're looking at Smallwood now, which I think the Eagles want to go with anyway, which is what's holding up Smallwood now is his pass protection. But if that is the case, if you're that concerned about it, you already use multiple tight end sets if you're Doug Peterson. So get a tight end on that side, you're lining him up, and get that max protection there so you can use him in his running and pass catching abilities. Because when you have a guy, Wendell Smallwood, and I've talked about this before when he was first drafted as a 5th-round pick out of West Virginia 2 years ago, this is a guy that can run in between the tackles, but can also give you that speed and accelerate it once he gets to the edge and give you some yardage that way, which the Eagles want to do with their inside zone and outside zone runs. And those outside zone runs, let's face it, LeGarrette Blount just can't handle that. And then you throw in Clements as a little bit of a change-up back, and then you see what he can do from there. So I think that's where the Eagles should go from here. Will they? I don't really know. It's really hard to tell at this point. But the bottom line is, D-Jock, the run-to-pass ratio has to get better. It was 52-13 last week if you count all the dropbacks and then the takeoffs from Carson Wentz. So overall, obviously the Eagles have to get better in the run-pass ratio. We both know that. But where do you stand on this as far as who should be getting a bulk of the carries now going forward for the Eagles?
Looks like some weird with D-Jock's connections, like 2 Tylers showing up. Do you see that, Controller?
Yeah, I do. All right, we'll get back to Tyler on that. So, Alex,
I'm back. Sorry, guys.
Oh, here we go. Okay, he's back.
I switched over to my other computer. But my apologies. Yeah, you're talking about Blunt. I mean, I don't think it's really a Blunt issue. It's a play calling issue. I mean, it has nothing to do with whether it's Smallwood back there or Clement. It's just, Peterson is just not, committing to the run, and the run's not working out that well. And as I said before, each week, broken record, he is not a good fit for this offense, Blunt. So, I don't know what you want them to do, Matt. I mean, if you put Smallwood or Clement back there, that's not going to do much. It's a play calling issue. So I don't know what you want out of Peterson or the offense.
But based on the personnel they have right now, because let's face it, there's nobody out there that can fix this. So, there is some play calling issues as a part of the problem here, which used to be my argument for Blunt. But still, when I look at you go from 14-0 in back-to-back weeks, that's still telling me something. But yes, I do agree. It is on Doug Peterson to continue to stay with the run and get to it early enough in the ball game where you're in it, where you can start establishing it and get these guys into a rhythm, because that's a big part of why you can have a successful running game. And when the Eagles did run the football for those 13 times, they averaged 4 yards a carry. Now, it was mostly from Sproles, but you get my point here. If you stick with the run, the Eagles do have that ability to run the football effectively when you look at that stat alone. It's just the Eagles and Doug Peterson need to find a way to just stick to it, and you can get more yardage out of it, because or else you're going to get Carson Wentz killed after getting sacked 6 times last week.
I'm going to jump in here. Now, like I said with Blunt, he's a guy that I was not crazy about when he got signed. He's a guy that's only really ever had success in New England, where everyone's always able to find success. He's a one-dimensional guy. He's going to, it's not going to give you much in the receiving game, not going to give you much as a blocker. And so you're seeing how quickly, you're having trouble. I think the issue with this now is that I try not to get caught up in run-pass ratios, because all I care about is moving the football. And I'm not going to run the football if I can't run the football just to say that I'm running the football. I think that's kind of insanity to do. But, as I've said before, the issue with the Eagles, things always hold that offense back, at least in the, new Peterson era, is the lack of the run game. And have not been able to find that guy. So if you're Philadelphia, you got to go into next year, because like you said, Control, it's not a whole lot of fixes this year. You got to go into next year with running back number 1 top of that list.
No question.
Without that run game, which has just been completely ignored, which I think is one of maybe Peterson's biggest mistakes he's made so far in his 2 years as the coach, this offense is not going to get to where it needs to go.
It's interesting, Alex, that you bring that up, because I've been thinking about it today and just how the Eagles just don't have any ammunition right now to try and move up to get a guy like a Saquon Barkley, because he's easily going to be the best running back out of Penn State this year in this upcoming running back class. But when you look at next year's draft, the Eagles don't have a 2nd or 3rd round pick. They have 3 4th-rounders, but that's not going to be nearly enough to give up, in addition to maybe another 1st-round pick or 2, to move up and get a guy like Saquon Barkley.
Well, who says you're going to be moving up? If your run game falters like this, you might be staying at a spot where you can just pick them.
Yeah, it's a good point.
You got the Geis kid from LSU. The running back class next year is really strong, so I don't think you're going to have to feel compelled to move up to go draft one of those guys.
Yeah, it's a good point. It will be a D class, but I love what Saquon Barkley's doing right now at Penn State. I mean, he just made Georgia State look silly, as he should have last week. But I've had a chance to interview him at a time last year, so I think he's a really good kid. I think he's going to be a really, really solid and special NFL player. I think he's a special football player right now. But you are right. We're very early in the season. Eagles could be in that spot. They may not be, but either way, it's going to be a deep running back class.
My last question for the Eagles run game is, why not Sproles? I mean, he's been the most proven guy as a runner.
In terms of this year, I mean, they're definitely going to have to. He's going to have to be almost the primary guy too. You might go with him, but at the same time,
but your suggestion was Smallwood and Clement. You didn't mention Sproles at all.
Well, the only problem with Sproles is he's still he's proven that he can run in between the tackles, but you don't want to have to rely on him game in and game out to run the ball up the middle 15, 20 times a game, because you eventually will wear him down. If you're the Eagles, you don't want him to do that. You want him to be a primary part of the offense still, but only still limit his reps in terms of taking carries from behind the backfield.
You don't have a whole lot of options. He's been your most proven guy. So
I know
it's not last year. You might as well. It's not like you're looking long term with him.
And that argument has been made, Alex, but I'm just thinking if you want to win this year, you can't wear him down like that. And I still think the Eagles can win this year.
If you want to win this year, you got to have some semblance of a run game.
I get it. It's a very weird and horrible situation for the Eagles to be in as far as the run game goes. I don't even know if this solution works for me. I don't know because, again, we haven't really seen a whole lot of Smallwood either. So I think, which is why I still think ultimately you're going to see, obviously, the run game struggle because I don't think Peterson's going to still commit to any one back either. This is still, I think, still going to ultimately be a committee. I'm just saying who should probably get bulk on the carries when in terms of trying to establish the run primarily in between the tackles. And Sproles has never been that kind of guy.
I think that this is a team that has to look at other options. You're looking at the short pass game, screens, and RPOs, and slants, three-step game, to substitute the lack of a run game. Because I don't think you can just force the run game and make it happen. I just, the run game is going to be below average probably all year long. And so I get the idea of you have to run the ball, situationally, but I think you just can't run the ball for the sake of running the football. So you're probably going to see them throw the football 2/3 of the time this year because it's just their best option.
And they do have the personnel to get some of those screens going, and when they were able to do that and they were able to use maybe some of the hurry up that we've seen for the first 2 weeks, they can move the football. I mean, they proved that against a good defense in the Chiefs last week. I just worry about will it eventually take away the long vertical pass because then you can see a lot of defenses where I think the Eagles could do this week against a team like the Giants, who's also struggling to run the football, is you just sit back and play a lot of cover two, just don't allow everything over the top and just play everything in front of you. That's my only worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's valid, but, you got to do something. Defense is always going to counter. But, good luck running against the Giants because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, definitely not against that front four, and we'll get into those matchups a little bit later on, too. One other thing I wanted to point out with the Eagles, Alex, is there were still a lot of good takeaways from this game and strides that I think the Eagles can build upon despite these issues with the running game. And mostly comes on the defensive side of the ball where they shine despite being shorthanded. Rasul Douglas especially, third-round pick last year out of West Virginia, had a big pass breakup late in the second half. Plus, he was pretty much covering Tyreek Hill for a majority of the game, and he held his own. Tyreek Hill really was not that much of a factor in this football game. So I guess from Rasul Douglas alone, is this maybe a good sign of things to come here for him in the secondary, despite all the injuries that the Eagles have, and this week included?
Sure, it's not a bad sign. I'm surprised but happy to hear he did well against Hill because my big issue with Douglas was the lack of straight line speed. I thought he was best as an off ball or off press zone kind of corner that could just rally downhill and make plays in the football. He had 8 interceptions his last year at WVU, but certainly a good sign.
And the Eagles front four, of course, I think overall, then they had 4 sacks last week in the loss at Kansas City, which of course is a very good sign. And like the Steelers offense, the Steelers defense rather, they've been very productive to start the year. It's ultimately going to come down to them. I mean, that's the way it always been when you're in Jim Schwartz's system. But especially now with how depleted the Eagles are, they may not be. It looks like there's going to be no Rodney McLeod this week, no Jalen Watkins, who I'm not a big fan of, but just in terms of bodies, you don't have him available. And now Corey Graham may not be available, which really worries me now. Because now you have a guy like Rouge Hill, for the Eagles, one of the backup linebackers, good special teams player, is taking reps at safety for emergency purposes. So the Eagles are very thin. They did sign somebody yesterday to the practice squad. So they are very paper thin at safety. But I think overall, again, it's going to come down to the Eagles front four and how they can get pressure on the quarterback, which obviously you would think this is a very favorable matchup facing that Giants offensive line after another atrocious week on Monday night.
Yeah, that'll be the key, definitely getting pressure and definitely attacking Eric Flowers. We'll see. The Giants have to give that guy help, and if they don't, then that's almost a fireable offense. Yeah,
I would anticipate that happening, but again, we will definitely have to see about that. D-Jock, you still with us? What are your thoughts on where the Eagles stand here on both sides of the ball?
No, I was falling asleep. I apologize. No, they looked good. I mean, it was a winnable game. The offense struggled for the most part. The offensive line obviously is not as good as we thought it was. Jason Peters kind of lost a step a little bit. Coming up here, we're going to talk about they may have changed an offensive line too with Sayamalu. I know the Wentz looked good. The receiving core looked good. We've been talking about the running backs already. Defense overall was okay. The defensive line looked very, very good so far. Secondary, as you said, kind of struggles, but Douglas played well. I mean, it was disappointing that they played well, but not well enough to win. But still, I'm not down on them at all, really. So.
All right, well, let's go to what's going to be happening at guard, the change of the guard, if you will. D-Jock, is Isaac Seumalo, who gave up 3 sacks last week in the Kansas City game, looks like will be benched this week. It hasn't been made official yet, but it seems to be that way based on what we've been seeing in practice, as Chance Warmack, who was just signed in the offseason as a free agent, has been taking all the first-team reps at left guard this week. And again, of course, he hasn't really played a whole lot hasn't played at all in the regular season. I didn't think he had that great a preseason. So, D-Jock, are you surprised this change came this quickly for Seumalo despite giving up 3 sacks, and plus he struggled the week before? Do you think the Eagles were being a little hasty here, or did you think this was the right call?
I mean, yeah, something has to be done. It's probably not all his fault. Maybe something happened during the week that we don't know about, or just making a change. I mean, I don't think it's a huge thing. I mean, couple games and made a change. I mean, they're already kind of thin at offensive line. They made named escape. Made that trade of their lineman to the Broncos. That's kind of coming back to
Alan Barbery, right? Yeah, and I agree there.
Thank you. Yeah, Barbery. So that kind of haunting them. People say, they thought they were good. Pro Football Focus came out, said they're number 1 line.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Yes, so maybe it got to their head a little bit, or maybe they thought this line was good enough. But that's somebody I would love to have back now. Barbery, on this line right now.
Right, and it's a great point you bring up, D-Jock, because when that trade using Barbery was made when he went to Denver during training camp, I wasn't a big fan of that move. I was very surprised because of all the big leap of faith that the coaching staff was putting in this Isaac Seumalo kid. And I agree there are some things to like about him on his tape, but I don't think he was perfect. I mean, he's a 3rd-round pick for a reason. He still needed some work. I think he's ready to step in right away. And eventually down the line, you're maybe thinking about this kid stepping in at center once Jason Kelsey's done. So I think that's a major concern here for the Eagles, that the fact that you think that you needed to pull him after 2 games. Now, I agree. I think it should have been done because he was playing so poorly, but I don't think Warmack is the guy to go in the spot, because I don't think he was that great in the preseason either. I think you have a guy in Stefan Wisniewski who can play center and guard and who is still fairly young. I think he should be put in there right away, because when called upon last year, he was very, very solid. So I don't really understand what his position is on the football team right now, based on what I remember from last year, and the Eagles went to him right away. So that I really don't understand, and why Warmack's getting this chance here, D-Jock.
Well, we're going in circles now. Yeah, it was just to see what happens. I mean, Warmack was a high draft pick coming out. He hasn't produced, but I mean, Eagles are making a change. Either it goes really bad or really good. You can always go back to Seumalo, moving stuff around. They're just trying to fix things. I mean, I don't know why you're upset for them trying to fix. I mean, we'd much rather have Seumalo come out this week and give up another 3 sacks and say, why don't you do anything?
No, but I'm just saying put in the right personnel. I don't think Warmack's the right guy to put in there. I think it's Stefan Wisniewski. That's my point. I agree the change should have been made. I'm glad they're making that change. Am I concerned about Seumalo's future? Certainly, because of the stock that this coaching staff first put into him. But my point is, I don't think Warmack's the right guy. Alex, what are your thoughts on this?
I was fine with the Barbery trade, because I think you have good depth otherwise with Warmack and Wisniewski, that you could. A guy like Barbery was expendable. I don't have much of an opinion between Wisniewski and Warmack. I haven't watched enough, with the Eagles to have an educated opinion. I like Wisniewski throughout his career more than Warmack. Warmack kind of, was obviously a bust in Tennessee, but I get why they're making the move. So, again, if they can go to Wisniewski, then that's always an option.
So we'll continue to keep an eye on that for the Eagles this week, trying to get the running game going, trying to beef up their protection with Carson Wentz, because they only need to do that against that Giants front 4, which is still a very good defense despite all their offensive woes. So we'll get back to that matchup a little bit later on in the show. But as I mentioned earlier, guys, a lot of wild storylines emerged Sunday morning before kickoff. We talked about the Sam Bradford not playing and coming up there being a late scratch. We talked about that. The first thing that came up before that news came up was reports saying Jerry Jones impeding on Roger Goodell's contract negotiations. And he was reportedly an unofficial 7th member of a 6-member committee. He did confirm his role yesterday on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. Your thoughts on that, guys, and Jerry Jones kind of impeding himself on these issues? Let me start with Alex.
I don't know. I don't really get into that kind of contract, CBA stuff. That's not really my wheelhouse. I'm not sure exactly what Jerry Jones' issue is. Obviously, the logical thought is he's smarting from the whole Zeke situation.
I think that's clearly the reason.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to happen. I mean, whether Jerry impeded or not, Goodell's going to get his contract extension. That's what the majority of ownership is going to want. So I don't think it really matters.
Right, and Adam Schefter did report on ESPN today that it's pretty much a done deal at this point. It's just a matter of putting ink to the paper. So we'll have to keep an eye on that once the final numbers come out. D-Jock, what were your thoughts on Jerry Jones here?
No, same thing. I mean, I don't care. I don't think it's a big issue. As Alex said, it's bound to happen. He's been in the league for a while as an owner. He's knows and stuff, and other stuff. So I think I don't know. It's a non-issue, and as Alex said, it's going to turn out to be a good deal.
The only thing that puzzles me about this, guys, is going back on the Brady thing a couple of years ago. Although I guess he wasn't really up for a contract then, so I really can't say that. But even so, I know we're behind. We have that behind us now. But I don't know why. I guess I'm just a little surprised that Robert Kraft wouldn't have been the guy to have been the impeder besides Jerry Jones here. I know Jerry Jones just had this incident happen to him more recently than the Brady thing, but let's face it. I mean, Goodell and Kraft weren't on the best terms during the Brady time. What are your thoughts there, Alex?
No, not really. Again, I don't really get into these owner-commissioner relationships. I don't care what a bunch of white multi-millionaire, billionaire guys are doing. I don't know. Goodell was at New England for the start of the year, and I think he's been around Kraft post Brady, Deflategate. So, it's whatever. At the end of the day, I don't really care who impedes it. I think it's a more interesting discussion of whether or not Goodell deserves contract extension. He's obviously going to get it, but any of the politics behind it, I could care less about.
Is he deserving of it then?
I mean, I think from a fan's perspective, no. But if you're an owner and the league is still making gobs of money, and that's all really you care about at the end of the day, then, he's doing what the owners want him to do. So the owners are going to reward him with another fat contract extension.
I pretty much share the same thoughts there in agreeing with you, Alex. D-Jock, out of curiosity, do you feel that Goodell's worthy of this extension?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as you guys said, as Alex said. It's football, it's a business. They're making billions and billions of dollars, so I guess Goodell hasn't run the sport to the ground yet, so.
And then the other issue that came about, of course, this also kind of, I don't really say links to the Steelers, just the fact that it's a former Steeler in Lawrence Timmons, who has been a very good guy on and off the field, Alex, as we kind of talked about it off air here. He doesn't play versus the Chargers after leaving the team abruptly the night before, apparently angered over something, a personal reason, not football related. He went missing and was found Sunday morning by the team after they kind of had some help from the local authorities there in Los Angeles. Now he's suspended indefinitely by the Dolphins, according to ESPN's Jeff Darlington, and according to him as well, Adam Gase, still upset with Timmons for leaving the team without notice, obviously, and doesn't like any of the explanations that he's been receiving so far. He was supposed to have, this is Timmons that is, was supposed to have visited a doctor Monday to deal with these personal matters that apparently came up and why he just got angry all of a sudden and just abruptly left the team. That's per ESPN's Adam Schefter. So, Alex, let me start with you on this. Do you agree with the way the Dolphins have handled the situation so far by just suspending Timmons indefinitely?
Well, it's impossible for me to really give a good read on the situation because I don't know all the facts. But obviously, you can understand the frustration from the Dolphins' end that Timmons just didn't show up and went AWOL and didn't know what was going on. Now, I don't know how valid that is and what Timmons' exact excuse is. There's been a lot of rumors about it, but I care more about just Timmons' well-being and state of mind right now. Super dependable guy in Pittsburgh, well-liked, never missed a game, let alone a practice. I mean, the guy, even when he was battling a really severe turf toe injury in 2015, still just did not miss any time. So he's always been someone you can count on. So all I care about is just that he's doing well and whatever issue he's having is either resolved or gets resolved more than I care about anything football-related right now.
Yeah, I pretty much think when I look back from the little facts that we've known so far, Alex, I think this is the only thing really the Dolphins could do because he clearly as you mentioned, just needs to get time to get away from football and get his life and get his act together. Because obviously something is very wrong, most likely mentally, but it could be something physically. Who knows? Again, we need all that information to come through. But, I mean, the fact is he still left the team without permission. Still something comes up. And when you throw that all together, he's just got to get away from football right now. So I think this is probably the best that all that the Dolphins can do at this point. D-Jock, any other thoughts to this?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, we're not in the room there, whether it was an actual emergency personal issue or he just, did something weird or crazy. Or, I mean, I agree with both you guys. If he's, having like a, mental issues, whatever, needs to step away from football. That's the best thing for him. But I mean, some of it happens not all the time, but you've seen it before. So I mean, that's right. We'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know whether they said suspended as opposed to taking a indefinite leave of absence. Kind of changes the terminology there, but I think overall it'll be all right.
Yeah, it's a fair point in terms of the terminology, but I'm just obviously, as we're all in agreements here, bottom line is he needs to get away from football and deal with his personal matters off the field. And then thirdly, guys, this is obviously, not a whole lot to talk about here, just more the reactionary terms of the Cowboys-Broncos game, delayed 62 minutes due to lightning in the area. But, of course, it really didn't have any effect on the Broncos, D-Jock, because they smashed the Cowboys 42-17, and they just went right through it and picked up where they left off after jumping out to a 7-0 lead early in the first quarter.
What's the talking point here? It was weather. What's the...
Well, it was more or less, it didn't really affect the Broncos, and you're able to you had that early momentum going. You have that happen, and the fact that they were able to kind of pick up where they left off, I thought was somewhat impressive here. I mean, it's still a good win against a good Dallas offense, and you throw in they shut down Elliott, put all that together. I mean, I still think it's something to look at.
No, I guess I kind of agree. Yeah, it was kind of weird because you got all warmed up, ready to go, then the weather came, you had to, relax, and then try to gear it back up. But I mean, I guess I don't know last time there was a weather delay during a football game, but like an hour weather delay is kind of long. But I don't think it's a huge thing. I mean, they geared down and they geared right back up. It didn't affect either team too much. I guess it's this kind of freaky thing.
Right, and obviously you can make the argument some people may make the argument that it affected the Cowboys, but I don't think it did, just because I just think the Broncos were just playing really good football and had a good game plan to shut down Elliott, which led to all the turnover issues and the struggles of Dak Prescott, which of course we're all not used to seeing. Alex, any other thoughts to this?
No, like D-Jock said, it's weather related. Both teams have to deal with it. I don't have much of a reaction to it.
Well, we'll head back to some Steelers football now, guys, to get ready to take on the Chicago Bears this week in Chicago. And I know that there's been a lot of angst maybe around some Steeler fans, some parts of Steeler Nation, where the Steelers could play down to their opponent in being Chicago with the struggles they've had offensively. They didn't have a great game last week in Tampa Bay after playing fairly well the week before against the defending NFC champ Atlanta Falcons. And I don't see that really happening either with the Steelers. I think they're going to come out firing, ready to go. I think they're going to try to take control of this game early, just because offensively that we saw, as we mentioned, they took some better strides last week. But at the same time, I know they still have plenty of things to work on. It's another game for them to take another step in that right direction to get where they want to be. Defensively, they're on a roll right now. And the way Mike Glennon played last week, I think the Steelers can clearly take some turnovers away from them and help change those into points, or at least set up their offense for points. So I really don't foresee that happening here, and I think the Steelers have a very good chance to win this game fairly comfortably on the road, despite their road issues, Alex. I know that could be a concern too, but I just don't think the matchups really speak for themselves here if you're looking at this from a Bears standpoint.
Well, no, they don't, but I think fairly comfortably, and Steelers on the road are words that don't often go together, so I can never really feel too comfortable about that. But yeah, the Steelers run game, if there's, I think I said this before, but if there's an issue this weekend against the Bears, then I think there's going to be some cause for concern about where the Steelers run game is at and where it's going. Because while the Bears have a decent defensive line, the Steelers might be without right tackle Marcus Gilbert. Still, it's a 3-4 team. Bears are on their third inside linebacker. A guy named Cheese is playing inside linebacker. Like, you better be able to run, put up 100 on them. So
yeah.
The secondary is weak. The receivers are non-existent. If you could just, as long as it doesn't turn into a repeat of last year, And there's some shades of it where Steelers were 2-0 last year heading into week 3 against an Eagles team that was 2-0. They had Darren Sproles killing Eagles. Bears have Tarek Cohen, who's got all the Sproles comparisons.
Plus Jordan Howard, too. He's had a good year so far. Good start.
What's that?
Plus Jordan Howard has had a fairly good start.
No, he's been pretty terrible. He's averaged 2.7 yards per carry and has a shoulder injury.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the guy you were talking about before. I'm sorry.
You can never get too comfortable about this stuff. Steelers should win. I'm going to pick them to win. Spoiler alert. But fairly comfortably, I can never get to that point.
D-Jock, how do you see this game falling this week in Chicago?
I mean, yeah, it's not going to be a cakewalk. I mean, the Bears have some good parts and stuff, and I'll be interested to see what happens with the running back position there. But again, the Steelers should win it pretty handily, but I don't think it's going to be like a 56-0 blowout. But the Steelers should be in control most of the game and win pretty easily.
All right, so we'll make our picks coming up in next game, new game a little bit later on in the podcast. So next we'll jump to Giants-Eagles, and we've kind of thrown a couple of things out there already what we're looking for in this game. Of course, the Giants' offensive line has been awful. If there's any other way to describe it so far. But the one thing I wanted to touch on the Giants this week, they've had some minor, I guess, not really tips in locker room, but in terms of the media, we'll call it, with Ben McAdoo calling out Eli Manning this week on the 4th-and-goal delay game that they had towards the goal line late. I believe it was late in the third quarter. It was still 17-7 Lions at that point. And Ben McAdoo called out Eli saying, that's poor quarterback play. He's got to be able to get the snap off, which he's not wrong in that regard, but you've got bigger issues like your offensive line protecting said quarterback than you do with said quarterback trying to get the snap off at a critical point in the game, I would think, in terms of the big picture for your season. So, D-Jock, let me start with you. Did you have any issues with Ben McAdoo's comments against Eli Manning this week?
No, kind of exactly what both of them said. Manning's been in the league for 12, 13 years now, whatever, and he expects that he's the franchise quarterback of the Giants and a top 10 quarterback. No, he just challenged. I mean, I'm sure. Mike Tomlin. Do the same thing with Brady. Those guys are franchise quarterbacks and big, face of the franchise. I have zero problem. I mean, you're a quarterback in the NFL team and a pretty good one for a while here, and I like stuff that's happened when players and coaches are more open than the scripted answers. So I like it.
Alex, what were your thoughts on McAdoo's comments?
I was fine with him. Team needs a wake-up call. Team needs kicking the butt. Giants' offense is so disgustingly bad, and that was such an awful sequence of plays. Now, I think they should have kicked the field goal in the first place, but it doesn't really matter what I think. But, need a wake-up call, so I'm all for it.
And you know what? I actually agree with that. I know he's been getting a lot of backlash from the New York media about what he said, but you know what? What other way to light a fire under your team than to criticize your quarterback who may or may not deserve it? Well, in that case, he deserved it, but in terms of he's not the biggest problem, everyone knows the biggest problem is the offensive line. So I think overall, I think that was a good move by McAdoo just to call Eli out, which is something that's never done before. And then Eli had the perfect answer, as he usually does all the time, in saying he wants to be coached up like that, and he made that known to Ben McAdoo when he first became head coach. Everyone forgets, Eli Manning was a big advocate for Ben McAdoo when Tom Coughlin was about to get let go by the Giants. The front office went to Eli and said, if we don't have Tom Coughlin, who do you want? He said Ben McAdoo, because that system works for Eli Manning, even though it doesn't show it right now. And, obviously he's a good play caller. He had been calling the plays well and stuff like that. But overall, the point is Eli Manning is an advocate for Ben McAdoo, and he played it off very well when the media pestered him about that earlier on this week.
Here's my question, Catrillo. Is Eli Manning still a 10 to 15, quarterback in the NFL, as you said last week? Foolishly said last week.
Yes.
Is he still better than Cam Newton and Jameis Winston? Which you said last week. Foolishly said last week.
Yes, I'm sticking with it. With it.
I figured you would. All right. I think it's a very dumb comment to say. But look how bad they're doing. Look how awful Eli in his offense is playing right now.
But I don't know what you want Eli to do when he's getting hammered each and every play because of that god-awful offensive line.
Too. It's not. You can't blame it all on the offensive line. He's clearly not helping this offense either.
He hasn't been perfect
this way for a while.
Yeah, he hasn't been perfect either, but you look at Cam Newton, for instance, he wasn't exactly lighting it up last week either. His team scored 9 points and barely won against a terrible Bills team.
At least they're winning.
If we're comparing it here.
At least they're winning.
They're 1-1. It's not like they're 2-0.
Better than the Giants. They're better than the Giants.
Well, if we're comparing it, well, either way, if we're comparing individuals here, Cam Newton hasn't been exactly lighting it up either. But in terms of Eli Manning, yes, he hasn't. But in terms of Eli Manning, yes, he has not been perfect. Obviously, he's been far from it. But a majority,
far from it, yeah. Don't give me that hedgy
stuff.
But
majority of the reason has been because of that atrocious offensive line, which has resulted in a non-existent running game.
Why do you think to make excuses for Eli, but we can't make excuses for Cam?
Because Cam puts a lot of those decisions on himself because of just the way he plays the game, because of the decisions when he runs the football, the way he conducts himself, on a personal level and trying from a leadership standpoint. All that goes into play when you evaluate quarterbacks.
All right, so you're saying that Cam's not as good as a leader as Eli Manning?
Yes, I think that's pretty clear.
So Eli's a better leader, is that what you're saying, just to clarify?
I absolutely 100% agree with that, yes.
And then who's a better leader, Jameis Winston or Eli Manning?
Eli Manning.
All right.
Especially if we're going, say what you want about it from a physical standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint, I think Eli's one of the best out there right now. And the way he
has Eli done the lead in the last 3 years? Who has he led?
I think the way he's handled himself this week, I think is a prime example of that.
Okay, that's great.
Put Cam Newton in the situation what Eli was in last week. Cam Newton would have pouted himself to death to the media, and he would have made this a whole lot worse than what Eli did this week. The way Eli handled himself this week was what you want from every quarterback in this league to handle himself by.
Man, all Cam Newton does is get a lot of hate from people like you and I think he handles himself very well. And same with Jameis Winston. Winston's regarded as one of the best leaders at the quarterback position. Talking about a strictly on-the-field situation. What he did at Florida State, he did it at Tampa Bay to bring this team from the depths. So I think you got a pretty hard bias there, Cotrilla, but I don't want to spend too much time on this.
I know. I would put Winston ahead of Cam Newton. If we're going to just these three quarterbacks, I put Eli, Winston, and Cam Newton. And I think you even saw Winston really emerge from that even more, if you didn't see it already during his college days at the combine when he was there. The way he was able. He kind of took charge of the drills and things like that when you go through that sequence. But anyway, yeah, we don't want to get sidetracked here. So getting back to the game here, I think from a defensive standpoint from the Eagles, and D-Job will go to you next on where you stand here, keys and stuff like that, is a lot of defenses so far in facing the Giants offense have been playing that cover 2 and kind of let everything kind of play in front of them because the Giants have been proven that they can move the football consistently. They only had 4 first downs in their loss in Dallas. Obviously, it didn't get that much better last week. They finally scored a touchdown, but you're still looking at an offense that hasn't scored over 20 points in its last 8 games. That is a huge issue, and I think until the Giants prove it, the Eagles, especially how paper thin they are in the secondary right now, especially at safety, they should be playing back and keep everything in front of them, especially when the Giants still have that ability to burn you down the field. I think Odell Beckham Jr. is a little bit ahead in his rehab. Now, he only had a handful of snaps. He had 33 snaps, I think it was, last week. And I think you could see that go up this week. I still don't know if he'll be much of a factor, but when you look at it in terms of the Eagles, he's killed the Eagles in the last 3-4 games that they've played. So I think if you're Jim Schwartz, you got to be able to do that and rely on your front four to get pressure on Eli Manning, which I think if you're the Eagles, you should be able to do because of how poor that Giants offensive line has been. Let me get you in here from other keys for the Eagles here this week.
Well, what's your question? I cut out during your long ramble. So what's your question?
What do you want to see from this Eagles defense in defending this Giants offense this week, and what do you see vice versa, Eagles offense versus Giants defense?
Gotcha. Well, obviously the Giants offense looked really bad, worse than the Eagles. The Giants defense have looked really bad, worse than the Eagles. It is a divisional game, which is always good. So that's when you throw out the record, you throw everything out. It's a big rivalry game. I mean, it could be a good, bad game. There's also, I would not be surprised if either team breaks out. You have Beckham Jr.'s kind of back healthy. Eli Manning is still Eli Manning, even though his offensive line is really bad. And it's the Eagles. The Eagles, could get clicking. Maybe, bringing in Chance Warmack kind of shores up that offensive line there. Again, the Eagles defense has looked good, as we talked about, and I expect that defensive line to get, 3 or 4 sacks on Manning. So, this looks like a Eagles win. But as I said, it's a big spurts here. So really no big scouting report other than both teams are, scuffling on both sides of the ball. And, one of these teams will look to, break out. And every team, puts together quickly enough, will come into victory.
The other thing I want to mention about this matchup, I think this is another big game for Doug Peterson to continue to shut his critics down, is if the Eagles win this game, you go to 2-0 in the NFC East, which matches your win total from last year. You put the Giants at 0-3 and 0-2 in the division, and obviously you go to 2-1 overall. So just in terms of the standings and the thought process that the Eagles could possibly maybe play down to where the Giants are this week, even though it's their home opener, I don't see that happening. I think this is another good step in the right direction in terms of evaluating Doug Peterson as a head coach. Alex, what are your thoughts on this game finally here?
Obviously with the Giants offense, not a whole lot of threats there. I think the biggest thing is just worrying about some of the play pass and play action stuff the Giants are going to try to do just to get the linebackers and safeties to come up to create some big plays downfield. You have to watch Evan Ingram in the red zone. He caught a touchdown last week. I mean, obviously Odell Beckham Jr. is guy to worry about. But I think it's just the details and the keys and not getting sucked up by play action and things like that. For the Eagles offense, I think honestly it's going to be don't try to run the football. Don't run the football for the sake of it. It's not going to work. That front four for the Giants is way too tough. When it's led by big stacks in the middle of that thing, and then you have Vernon and JPP and Bromley and guys like that. So go with the RPOs. Go with the 3-step game. Don't run into a brick wall. That's just stupid. So that's the big key.
I think you and I were talking about Sproles earlier. I think he's going to be another vocal point in this game too, to get in space and keep the chains moving. So I think you could see that the short pass game, and I expect the same too for the Giants in the short pass game. And on their one and only touchdown drive of the game last week, Evan Ingram was a big part of that. So I think the Eagles definitely, if there's one guy they really got to account for, I think it's him, because he really gave the offense some sort of life when they had it earlier on in the football game. So we'll definitely be on the lookout for that. So we'll make our picks for both the Bears-Steelers game and Eagles-Giants coming up next. But first, after this break, we're going to join Michael Waterloo, who's going to join me as we get ready for Fantasy Football Week 3, our new segment here on the Football Friday podcast. So myself, Mike Waterloo, coming up next here on the Football Friday podcast. Welcome back to the Football Friday podcast. Matt Catrillo here with you. And we are now back for our new segment that we've introduced on the show to beginning last week, and now we've got it through the rest of the season. A new fantasy football segment, talking things all fantasy football with our man Michael Waterloo. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Michael Waterloo for all your latest fantasy news and notes and good stats and information as well from Mike. Mike, good to have you back on the show. How are you?
Doing well, Matt. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And, of course, also a reminder for you guys as well, since now we've got this segment going, if you have any questions for us fantasy-wise, make sure you tweet us either at mcatrillo, at Michael Waterloo, or at FFPodcast1. Be sure to do that. We can get your questions answered. So, Mike, let's just kind of start off kind of general from what we saw week 2. And it was a wild week, kind of more off the field with some of the off-the-field storylines that occurred, but some did affect fantasy. Most notably, Sam Bradford was a very late scratch from the knee injury that popped up. He had the swelling in the knee, didn't play in the loss against the Steelers. We'll see what his status is for Sunday for the Vikings. So your thoughts on that, and what other general takeaways you took from an interesting week 2?
Yeah, it really was interesting. It was a better week overall, I felt, than week 1. Week 1 kind of felt like it was boring. And you kind of saw the Vikings come out. There's an opening week, and it's just like, okay, this might be able to compete with the Packers there in the NFC North. But then you get the late notice that Sam Bradford's going to miss the game with the knee injury. It's nice to hear the ligaments are intact, even though there really wasn't a lot of certainty around his status. As it was that he's fine. He'll be fine. Mike Zimmer said it could be a 1-week injury, it could be a 6-week injury. So that's not really what you want to hear as fantasy owners. We've got a lot of questions pregame about, hey, how does this affect Adam Thielen? How does this affect Stephon Diggs?
Absolutely.
everybody, you still want to start them just because it's not like Case Keenum is Dan Orlovsky. I think it's the second Dan Orlovsky reference I've dropped on this podcast in the past 2 weeks here. But, he's a guy who's serviceable. But, you saw Stephon Diggs only hauling two catches, Adam Thielen only pulling 5. So it definitely affects them. It's going to be interesting to see going forward what happens, really hoping that Bradford plays this week against Tampa Bay. Early Wednesday was that they are expecting. Yeah, it was. It wasn't great for people who own the Vikings, but going forward, both receivers can't produce without him, but they really, really need him to reach their wide receiver 2 potential. And just overall in the league, it was just a great, crazy week. You have Michael Crabtree scoring not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns. The polar opposite of what you saw week 1 with Amari Cooper, where he was just getting peppered with red zone targets. Last year, I believe he had 17 total red zone targets, and he had 4 in week 1. So that was a thing the fantasy owners were looking for, because we might disagree on this, Matt, but to me, touchdowns are random. They're very fluky, and they're very lucky. You cannot predict touchdowns. You can't predict who's going to score them. There's so much luck that's involved there. So I was really hoping to turn around to be Cooper's year to get them instead of Crabtree, but you can't knock Crabtree. It produces every year with the Raiders, and he had 3 more on Sunday. So it was very, very fun to watch. And then, of course, you had the Saints and the Patriots. That was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful game for anybody that you owned on that team, unless his name was Brandon Cooks. But Rob Gronkowski, Chris Hogan, James White, even Rex Burkhead with a running back streak. That was great to see, too.
That's kind of an oxymoron that Brandon Cooks, out of all people, didn't get the big numbers from that game.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I'm having people text me saying, hey, is it time to drop Brandon Cooks? Should I be trading him?
Jeez, that's way too early for that.
Yeah, fantasy overreaction. People are asking me, what case can you make to start Brandon Cooks over Jacquizz Rodgers and Buck Allen this week? It's like, what case can you make to me that you're not starting him? And this is where the whole touchdowns are random. Yeah, he did not get his numbers. What's the reason for it? Maybe luck. Maybe because it was a revenge game going back to New Orleans, and Bill Belichick probably expected that the Saints would game plan for him. So he's like, okay, I'm going to go opposite of that. Or maybe it's just because Tom Brady missed him on a wide-open touchdown pass. If he would have caught that, everybody would have been silent this week. And the week before, he drew a deep pass interference play. So his opportunity is coming. Do not panic on Brandon Cooks. Don't do anything stupid. That's where the whole touchdown wasn't in play. If he would have hauled that in, no one would have said anything.
Especially because when you look at the Patriots overall, I think we all pretty much had a pretty good idea that after that loss they took on the chin to the Chiefs in Week 1 at home, that they were going to come out firing, especially against that Saints defense Week 2, which I can understand some of the Cooks thanks, but I got to imagine if you're New England from here on out, if you have anybody for New England, you got to be feeling pretty good because Tom Brady's going to be looking to really prove himself once again. He always just seems to play that chip on his shoulder, especially after that loss to Kansas City, no doubt.
Yeah, and they play the Texans this week at home. I think Brandon Cooks is a safe bet if you're playing DraftKings, FanDuel, any kind of daily fantasy, because if you're in a seasonal league and you're not playing him, you deserve to lose. But I think Brandon Cooks is a great play for you this week. I think that they really try to get him involved and just kind of shut that narrative up really quickly.
While we're on the subject of the Patriots, Mike, of course, Rob Gronkowski, after that nice game he had, he suffers yet another injury. So what's your status here as far as how owners should worry about him now going forward?
The safe thing that's where Gronk always gives you that advantage at tight end, but he can never justify that first or second round ADP because the guy is always banged up, and he's one severe back injury away from calling quits. I firmly believe that. I think you have about 2 more years of dominant Gronk, and then it's done. Go retire, go party like only Rob Gronkowski can. If you own him, there are some options out there. The one that makes the most sense is just to pick up Dwayne Allen because, as we've seen before, whether it's Scott Chandler, whether it's Timothy Wright, whether it's Martellus Bennett, whenever Gronk misses time, or even Aaron Hernandez, when Gronk misses time, the other tight end can fill in very, very well there. They naturally run a 2 tight end set. They've kind of gone away from that in years past, but they like to get both tight ends involved. You saw last week when Gronk came off the field. that Tom Brady targeted Dwayne Allen on a couple throws there. So that would be the smartest play. If you want the upside play, you can grab a Jack Doyle who had very good rapport with Jacoby Brissett last week. You can even have the ageless wonder Ben Watson, who isn't good, isn't sexy. Nobody wants to start Ben Watson, but Joe Flacco loves his tight ends, and he showed it again last week with very high volume. And the tricky part about that is they play 9:30 a.m. in London against Jacksonville. But the matchup is great because you have A.J. Boye on the outside and Jalen Ramsey on the outside. So where are you going to attack the Jags? You're going to attack them up the middle and try to hit Ben Watson early and often because he's going to be checking down to Buck Allen. He's going to be targeting Ben Watson. So those are the three names I'd really be targeting if you're a Gronk owner and his status is up in the air come Saturday.
Well, let's look at players for the Steelers and the Eagles who both have pretty favorable matchups this week. We'll start with the Eagles. It is a divisional matchup. It's going to be a tough one. You know, the Giants are desperate. They're 0-2 after that disastrous loss again on Monday night against the Detroit Lions. It's the Eagles' home opener as well. So we'll break down the matchup, of course, from an on-the-field standpoint. But in terms of fantasy, I think Eagles' defense, I would think, Mike, is definitely a good lock to play, facing that really struggling Giants' offensive line. And so I would imagine besides that, what are some Eagles' offensive players you're looking for in this game against still a very formidable Giants defense?
Yeah, you touched on it with the Eagles defense. That's actually my favorite play for them this week. People are all over the Dolphins facing the Jets, the Steelers facing the Bears, and your usual suspects with the Rams, and then even if you want to take the Browns or the Colts against the horrible offense, but we'll see how a horrible defense does against a horrible offense there. But when you want to talk about horrible offense, look no further than the New York Giants right now. They are putrid. I feel bad for Eric Flowers. I really do for the harassment he's getting. But, man, are they horrible. And I just think that Eagles defensive front is just going to feast on them all day on Sunday. I mean, they're not going to be able to be stopped. So, really, really like the Eagles defense. And they're reasonably priced on DraftKings and FanDuel this week for a one-time thing. Or pick them up in your league if you're a stream defense kind of a person. But as far as the other offensive options, it really is a tough matchup. I don't like Carson Wentz in this matchup. I actually wrote about him this week as my lead for my stock report, my weekly column. And I've been catching some flack from Eagles fans on there because I kind of said now's the time to sell Carson Wentz, and he really isn't as impressive as his numbers seem to be right now. There's a lot of underlying numbers there that I'm not a fan of that just kind of scream regression that you want to look out for if you're a Carson Wentz owner or Carson Wentz fan in general. So I really do think he's going to struggle this week. So I'm kind of pivoting away from him. The only option I really trust on that offense this week is Darren Sproles in a points per reception league as a low-end running back 2 or as a flex play. And then, of course, Zach Ertz. Can't get away from Ertz. He just has that volume all day that's going to be great for him. And Alshon Jeffrey had a really nice game last week. But like you said, that Giants secondary is very, very tough. So we'll see how he'll perform if Janoris Jenkins is able to go.
Let me just go back to the Giants offensively for 1 sec, Mike, because the one thing I took away from them in this game that would worry me from an on-field standpoint for the Eagles this week is the touchdown drive the Giants had that got the game tied up earlier in the first quarter was that they went to the short passing game and they won a lot of targets towards Evan Ingram at tight end. And I think they can try and do that again this week to slow down the Eagles' pass rush. So that being said, is that any sort of play that anybody, fantasy owners, can go for if they're in need of a tight end, they're desperate at tight end to go with the Giants' Evan Ingram, or do you still stay away from that?
No, I'm okay with Evan Ingram. I'm okay with Odell, of course, if he's good to go. And then even in deeper league, Shane Vereen, I don't mind. Like you said, it's going to be a lot of short dump-off passes. And Shane Vereen is their best running back, and he might lead the team in targets depending on Odell's health because Brandon Marshall's hot garbage. I respect the hell out of him as an actual person, but as a player, he's done. He's toast. He's kind of done there. Sterling Shepard, they don't get him involved for whatever reason. But it's going to be a lot of checkdowns to Vereen, a lot to Ingram as well, like you said. And he looks really good. He's basically a wide receiver that runs a 4.24 40-yard dash. And, he's a receiver that plays tight end. So if you are an aforementioned Gronk owner or Jordan Reed, who's banged up, or Greg Olsen, who's on IR designated to return, there's a lot of people looking for tight ends right now. So if you're one of them, Evan Ingram isn't a bad play. I think the Eagles are really going to rack up their fantasy points the way of sacks. Maybe interception just because Eli's Eli, and he's always making boneheaded throws out there. But yeah, I definitely like Ingram, Odell, and deeper leagues Verena's plays this week with the Giants.
Well, let's switch things to the Steelers now. They got the game in Chicago this week. I know there's a lot of angst that the Steelers might play down to the Bears, but I don't foresee that happening just because the Steelers are still looking to try and find their stride offensively. They were able to make some more adjustments and played better offensively last week. You were right on the money on forecasting Martavis Bryant. I think Alex said that too, and he had a big game. So I imagine anybody offensively for the Steelers is probably a pretty good play this week. Though they are playing a Bears defense that is playing fairly well. At least they played fairly well at home. They didn't play well on the road last week at Tampa Bay, but at home, I think that might be a little bit better for them for as far as the Bears defense goes. But like I said, either way, I think you're good for any Steelers offensive player, all the big names at least, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Even we touched on last week about Big Ben on the road and how horrible he really is there, but it's the Bears. I really think like people are kind of bummed out about the start that Le'Veon Bell has had so far, but again, I keep referencing DraftKings or FanDuel. I feel like I'm ESPN or something right now, always promoting them until people get tired of it. But like, if you're doing that, I think he's the most expensive running back this week. But I'll tell you right now, I have 5 lineups, and he's in every single one of them. Le'Veon Bell is going to go crazy this week. I have zero doubts about that. And even Ben on the road, it kind of makes me nervous. Back last year, he had 128 total fantasy points on the road, and that's 16 points per game. At home, in home games, he had 31.6, so he almost doubled up what he did on the road and home. That's how drastic a split it is. But again, Chicago, as long as the weather's okay, that defense is full school, don't care. I can't really put it on them last week because Mike Lennon was just horrible. He was just
wow,
horrible.
you actually criticized Mike Lennon. I'm proud of you, Mike.
Man, I just wanted him to get a chance, and right now he's kind of blowing it. So I think I'm moving on to Jared Goff as my new quarterback project. I love average quarterbacks, so we'll see. I think moving on to him. But, yeah, Antonio Brown, like him a lot. Martavis Bryant, really like him a lot. It's those two, and Le'Veon Bell. They can win you a lot of money this week and win you some leagues. I have zero doubt they're going to play down to them. I mean, the Steelers have done that before, but if they do that, I just think it's going to be a shootout, believe it or not. Maybe they'll put Mitchell Trubisky in there and just let him sling it around a little bit.
I think either way, if you're a Mike Lennon fan, you're going to see him lose a spot sooner rather than later, regardless of his play. So I think you'll see
if you're in a 2-quarterback league, you really shouldn't be owning Mike Lennon. But if you have room on your bench, you might want to pick up Trubisky and just kind of see what you have whenever the change happens.
There we go. All right, so now we've got our fantasy things aside, Mike. So, again, make sure you follow him on Twitter at Michael Waterloo. Real quick before we let you go, Mike, get some of your thoughts on the Eagles on the field this week. They lose a tough one to the Kansas City Chiefs, 27-20. And I guess the big thing that's been talked about for the Eagles this week coming out of that game, you've seen a lot of positives in that game, but obviously we've been focused on some of the negatives too. The big one being the running game. Where does it go from here? We talk about the pass-to-run ratio was obviously 52-13 last week if you include all the dropbacks for Wentz. And I had my piece that I referenced earlier on Pro Football Spot. Maybe it's time to go towards Corey Clemens and Corey Clemens.
Wendell Smallwood?
And Wendell Smallwood, right? So your thoughts on where the Eagles go from here at running back? Should they have stuck with LeGarrette Blount having no carries last week? Where do you stand on that?
You know, I said it last week. I'll say it again. LeGarrette Blount is trash. He is a plotter, just like the Saints should with Adrian Peterson. The Eagles should just cut him. He should not have made the 53-man team out of training camp. He is not a good football player. I don't care about 18 touchdowns. Again, touchdowns are luck. Touchdowns are fluky. Do not care about LeGarrette Blount. They need to see what they have. And Clemens, they need to see what they have in Smallwood. I was kind of disappointed to see Smallwood only get 3 carries last week, albeit he had 4 total yards on them, including the long run of 8 yards, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. So
right, I think it was in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'd really like to see them use those 2 more. And Darren Sproles is going to be your leading rusher. I mean, you can't get away with it. He had double-digit carries again last week and averaged almost 5 yards per carry, if I remember correctly. So the running game is just trash, and that's why you're going to see Carson Wentz just sling it. As I referenced earlier, he kind of makes me nervous from a real-life quarterback and also fantasy. Per Pro Football Focus, he has had 9 turnover-worthy plays so far this season. 9. That's 3 more than any other quarterback. And not only that, but he's on pace to throw 680 times, which would be the third highest total of all time. He's also on pace to be sacked 64 times.
He threw 608 last year.
Well, what was that?
He threw 608 passes last year.
680.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the third most ever. And, it really makes me nervous how he's going to hold up. Do we expect him to run for 50 yards every single game? No. Does that volume have to come down? Yeah, we saw Jameis Winston on pace to throw about 800 passes through the first 3 weeks last year. It's going to slow down a little bit. But the volume's still going to be there. Those turnover-worthy plays haven't come to fruition yet. He's gotten lucky, but he keeps doing that. I touched on last week, too. He's going to make a lot of mistakes, and he has been. They just haven't shown up yet in the box score, but they will. So the Eagles have to try to find some kind of running game, whether that's Smallwood or whether you just rely on Darren Sproles, but just not LeGarrette Blount, please. He is just not good, and he is just washed up.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Mike, to the guys, 0 carries to Blount after you give him 14 the week before says something to me. And I was a guy that I wanted to see Blount get more carries, but if you make that big of a switch in back-to-back weeks, then obviously they have to see something, and I have to trust the coaching staff on this one. So that's why I think if you go more Wendell Smallwood, a guy that can run in between the tackles, but also have enough speed to get to the edge, which LeGarrette Blount does not have anymore, and then you throw in Sproles, obviously, you definitely don't want to have him taking 15 to 20 carries per game just because of his size. You want to keep him fresh, especially for special teams too. Then you see what Corey Clement can do as a change-up back. And if you still want to use Blount here and there, I still think he can be serviceable if you go under center and give him the ball on short yardage and goal line situations. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. Very interesting, both from an on-field and fantasy perspective. But defensively, I know you like him this week. We talked about that earlier, Mike. And short-handed last week with the injuries to McLeod and Watkins, and looks like they may not play this week against the Giants. But Rasul Douglas was very impressive last week. He'll be tested again facing that Giants receiving core. And, of course, we talked about the front four, how relentless they were all game, getting pressure on Alex Smith, which most of the time doesn't happen. So I guess where are you standing with the Eagles' defense now?
Yeah, it's all about that. It's all about the front, the defensive front this week for the Giants. I just wanted to kind of take it 1 week at a time with them, and I think they're just going to get that pressure, and it's really going to overlook the weaknesses that they have in secondary where they're hurt. And I think if Odell's out there, you just shade his way, and you kind of force somebody else to beat you and see if Eli can get that much time. That's what you've seen defenses do against them so far this year. Even though Odell looked good out there this week, Eli just has no time. So I think they're going to be fine this week. I think any weaknesses are really going to be covered up and helped out just by that putrid offensive line for the Giants.
Well, Mike, certainly going to be a very interesting game at the Link on Sunday. Going to be a good week in fantasy football as it was last week. Good to have you back on, my man. Enjoy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt.
And there he is, Michael Waterloo. You can check him out on Twitter at Michael Waterloo. That's Water and then LOO. You see him on Roto Experts at FNTSY Sportsnet. Make sure you check him out for all your latest fantasy news, notes, and more. So coming up next during the Football Friday podcast, I'll return with the guys, and we will get ready for Week 3 with our Next Game, New Game segment, Week 3 edition. That's coming up next here on the Football Friday podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to the Football Friday podcast, Week 3 edition of the 2017 NFL season. Matt Catrillo, Alex Kozora, and Tyler DiGiacomo back here with you. Our thanks once again to our man Michael Waterloo, our news segment here on the podcast for fantasy football, getting you ready for your fantasy football Week 3. Again, make sure you follow him on Twitter at Michael Waterloo. We won't have him next week, so we'll get back to him the week after next, and maybe we'll attempt to try to do some fantasy football knowledge next week, guys, but maybe. We'll see about that. So let's go now to Next Game, New Game, Week 3 edition. D-Jock, take it away.
How's it going? Time for everyone's favorite segment, Next Game, New Game. Last week, as predicted by the staff of Matt, Ian, and Alex, Tyler took a big step back this week. Tyler went out on a big limb last week after getting off to a great start in Week 1. And really struggled this week. It's yours truly. Came in with a record of 7-9.
Let me see, because you picked the New York friggin' Jets.
After going 12-3 in the first week, had a 5-game drop-off. So sure. I think your boy's going to be a little more conservative this week. So I was 7-9. Mr. Kazora was 12-4. And
Nice.
somehow, some way, Matt Cachilla was 13-3.
Thank you. Back on track.
And now I'm going to ask you guys this live on the air. I have not asked this. Ian Hunter did not get his picks in for last week. So, should we just give him a 0-0 record for the week? Or should I just give him a 500 record of 8-8 and just call it a day? What do you guys think?
500 record, because you got to have the games still at equal. So I think anytime someone doesn't submit a pick, it should be 8-8 for the week.
I agree. 500 record.
Okay, so there you go. So he beat me by one.
That's kind of sad when you think about that. But
okay, so I'm going for it there. All right, so moving on. So overall, it's your boy is 19-12. It makes Ian 19-13 now. But that makes 0 sense then. I can't count. Otherwise, wait. If Ian's 19 and anyway, I'll recount those. I think. And Alex is 22-9. I think Matt's 23-8. So kind of close. So now time for week 3. Next game, new game. First game tonight. The Los Angeles Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. Matt, who you got?
another ugly Thursday night game to look forward to. But I will take the Rams. I think defensively, they will swallow up that 49ers offense, though I did like what Carlos Hyde did in Seattle last week. I think it's a close, ugly game, but I think the Rams pull it away in the end.
What you got?
I don't think it's going to be that terrible for the Rams side. Sean McVay's been such a great presence for Jared Goff and that offense as a whole. Todd Gurley's been playing better. The 49ers don't have much outside Carlos Hyde. So I think the Rams will bring some level of excitement tonight, and so I'll take them.
I'll go with that. I'm going to go on the limb here. Niners at home. This is a pick-em game for me. I think the Niners, this is a slight out on the limb for me. I think the Niners get it done.
I thought you were going to be conservative.
Well, this is a pick-em. Both teams suck. I mean,
the Rams are better than you think. Rams are better than you think.
I'm going with the Niners. Next game, new game. We'll go Giants at Eagles. We'll pick that right now, I guess. Alex, go first.
Eagles, just as how incompetent this Giants offense is. Look, if they put up 21 points against the Eagles, my goodness, Trilla's going to be an angry little man.
All right, Matt, who you got?
You are correct about that. This show will be ugly next week if the Eagles lose this game. I will take the Eagles by. I still think it's a close game. I'll say 24-16 Eagles.
I'm taking the Eagles also. Next game, new game, Steelers at Bears. I'll go with Matt, actually, for who you got.
Maybe it's close for a little while, but Pittsburgh pulls away.
Steelers, but if they don't, then I'll be an angry little man.
Good answer. Next game, new game, Ravens at Jaguars. Alex, what do you think?
Are you taking Steelers in this one?
Oh, I'm taking the Steelers. Thank you for keeping me honest. Taking the Steelers, yes.
That's what I'm here for. Ravens, Jags. I think that... Is anyone know if Brandon Williams is playing for the Ravens this week? Probably not.
No.
Should probably look that up.
No.
Go ask Controller real quick. I need to look this up. It's a big key to my answer.
Matt, what do you think?
Either way, I like the Ravens in this game. Both defenses are very good. It's going to be a low-scoring game, but I think the Ravens have way more offensively than the Jags right now, so I'll take Baltimore.
Alex, you done stalling yet, or what?
I couldn't find my answer because Petrillo gave somehow one of his shortest answers ever. Just the one time I get him to actually ramble. I think Baltimore's got a really good defense, but Jacksonville does too. I'll do this as a mild upset of the week, and I'll go with Jacksonville in this one.
Okay, I like it. Next game, new game, Broncos at Bills. Alex, what do you think?
Broncos, but the way they manhandle the Cowboys, I don't know if that's going to happen every single week, but show they can win big with Trevor Siemian. Bills just aren't very good.
Hey, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, give me the Broncos. They were very impressive last week. Bills stink.
By the way, I'm taking the Ravens last time, and taking the Bills this week, as always. Next game, new game, Falcons at Lions. Matt, what do you think?
This is an interesting game. The Lions are looking pretty good offensively. Defensively, they obviously feasted on the struggling Giants offense, but I still love the Falcons. I still think they're one of the best teams in the NFL right now, certainly the NFC. So I'll take the Falcons. I think they win a pretty competitive game in Detroit.
Alex, what do you think?
I'm going against the curve. No Vic Beasley. It's going to give the Lions the victory.
Lions. I like it. All right. I'm going with the Falcons. Next game, new game, interesting game. Browns at Colts. Alex, what do you think?
Oh, now you're talking about a toilet bowl. Now we're talking.
Yes, clearly.
Browns are road favorites for maybe the first time.
2.5-point favorite this week.
Yeah.
Week 15 of 2015, because I heard it on Mike and Mike, so yeah.
Yeah. You're the last person to watch Mike and Mike, so congratulations. I'm going to go.
Don't be sideways.
I think you love it more than they love it. I'm going to go with the Browns in this one. I like the Browns. The Browns are going to be a decent team this year.
Matty?
I like Cleveland, too, in this game. I think the defense is going to have a big day, force a couple of turnovers on Jacoby Brissett. Give me Cleveland.
I'm going the Browns also here. Buccaneers at Vikings. Matt?
Give me the Bucs. I know Sam Bradford will be back, should be back. I should say. I guess you really can't tell counting him on until he's on the field. But give me Tampa Bay. I think they're better offensively, and I think defensively they'll be able to get some pressure on Bradford, regardless, or whoever's a quarterback, and we'll make some plays, get some turnovers. Give me Tampa Bay to steal one on the road.
Alexander.
You're forgetting about how good Bradford was week one. Now that he's back, that's a really good Vikings team. You're not going to be able to run on them. And Xavier Rhodes can help shut down Mike Evans. Go Minnesota.
I'm going Vikes also. Next game, new game. Could be a Texans at Patriots, but I'll have the Patriots.
Yep.
Yes, New England.
All right, good job. Next game, new game. Dolphins at Jets. We'll go with Alex, I guess. What do you got?
You asked us with a question mark as if there's a debate here. I don't know what the debate could possibly be. It's going to be Miami.
All right. Same with you, Matt?
Yeah, I'll take Miami.
Maybe, you never know. Jets at home.
Oh, my God.
All right, next game, new game. Saints at Panthers. Matt, what do you think?
Despite what I said about Cam Newton earlier, New Orleans is that bad on defense that Cam Newton will probably bounce back after a tough one last week. Give me Carolina at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go Carolina as well, despite Catrillo's deep grudge against Cam Newton.
Hey, clean sweep. I'm going Panthers also. Moving into the 4:25 games here, Seahawks at Titans. Alex, what do you think?
This is a tough one. I'm going to go Tennessee, though. Derrick Henry's kind of cemented himself as the lead back. Russell Wilson keeps running for his life. He's not playing particularly well either. That defensive line for Seattle is the best thing they have going for him right now, but I like Dick LeBeau's defense as well, so I'm going Tennessee.
Matty.
I like Tennessee, too. You know, of all the grief we've been given the Giants' offensive line, the Seahawks deserve a lot, too, because they're equally as bad as the Giants. So I think Dick LeBeau's going to give Russell Wilson fits. Will force a couple turnovers. The Titans, even though they'll struggle running the football against that Seattle front, they'll find a way to win this game through the air or through maybe the legs of Marcus Mariota. So I'll give me Tennessee at home.
Same thing. Clean sweep there once again. Next game, new game. Bengals at Packers. Matt, what do you think?
Bengals are horrendous. They have not scored a touchdown yet this season. Give me Green Bay outright.
Alex?
What Catrillo said.
Oh, boy. That's the first time I ever said that. Next game, new game. The Kansas City Chiefs at the San Diego Los Angeles Chargers. Alex, what do you think?
All about those chefs. Give me Kansas City. They're going to keep on cooking. Look at that dad joke.
Oh, hey. Chef Boyardee. That's what you're having for dinner tonight. All right.
Probably.
Matt, what do you think?
Give me KC on the road. The Chargers, I like some of the pieces they have defensively, but not enough to stay with Kansas City. They take one on the road.
Next game, new game, moving into the Faith Hill versus Carrie Underwood game. The Raiders at the Redskins. Matt, what do you think?
I don't foresee this being that competitive of a game. I think it'll be close early. I think the Redskins front four, front seven could have some success getting to Derek Carr, but ultimately, Raiders just too much on both sides of the ball. Give me all.
Alex.
Raiders as well.
Good job. In the last game, the Dallas Cowboys at the Arizona Cardinals. Alex, what do you think?
Dallas will bounce back. They're not going to be, Zeke's not going to run the ball for 8 yards 2 weeks in a row. So, Dallas.
Matthew?
Yeah, Arizona's starting to get some real issues going here. They barely hung on against a horrendous Colts team on the road. So I think Dallas could whoop up on Arizona and bounce back from that shellacking they took from Denver last week. So give me Dallas.
That sounds good, Matt. That has been next game, new game.
All right, there you have it for week 3. Should be another interesting week. We'll see what happens. Boys, always good to talk business with you. We'll talk to you next week.
Yes, see you guys.
Are we done?
Yeah,
I didn't know if we were done or not.
Yeah, all right. So
see you next week.
Yeah. So that'll do it here for the show. Make sure to follow the show on Twitter at FFPodcast1. I'm at Twitter at MControllo. Alex is on Twitter at Alex_Kazora. And Tyler is on Twitter at Tyler_DiGiacomo. And don't forget Mike Waterloo. We thank him again for joining the show on Twitter at Michael Waterloo. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. For Alex and for Tyler and for Mike, I'm Matt Catrillo. Thanks for listening to the Football Friday podcast.